then, there is your art lesson. Now you'll notice that I have two pictures up here, and I'm not going to talk about them. They were going to be part of the art lesson, but as so often happens, when I start thinking about the art lesson, so many other things come up that what I intended to begin with ends up at the end and then gets left out entirely. So, but let me say just a few things about this. A skier and ice skaters. There's something very similar about the poses in both cases, and since you ski, you would know what it is. It's this. That person, in order to be doing what they are doing, has to be doing two things: going very fast and going around a curve. Those things are required. Nobody can be in this position unless they're skilled. Highly skilled can go very fast around a curve. The same is exactly true of this. These two skaters are going very fast, and they are highly skilled, because you cannot get into this speed, this rate of speed, without an enormous amount of practice. Nobody begins ever in this position. And their hands, her hand is touching the ice, his is able to touch the ice but isn't. So if you have ever been in this position, which I am positive that you probably have, you know that that hand can touch the ground. That's a situation. Now, how that relates to an art lesson is hard for me to say without giving you the art lesson, but it has to do with this. Anywhere you go, anywhere in the world, 100% of doorways will be a rectangle. And 100% of windows will be a rectangle. Now, granted, somebody might have a circular window, somebody might have a triangular window, but you can go for days and days and never see any of that, but doorways are always, and we use the term rectilinear, things which are made of rectangles. Houses like this room, your house, except for the roof, is made up of rectangles. And the fact that these shapes are always rectangles has a direct bearing on that image. But I'm not going to tell you what it is, because it'll take up the whole lesson. And I want to talk about this. What is this? This is a printout of what you wrote, the title of which, with a question mark, is Unbeknownst to I. Now, maybe what that means is you don't know what the title is going to be. Or maybe it's the title. But in either case, I like it. It's a good title. And what I want to talk about is this piece of writing, without you being able to interrupt me or shut off my microphone. First of all, I like this. And like I've said before, it's not sufficient to say that you like something. You have to be able to say why you like it. Now, I'll refer to a conversation we had one time. I said to you, do you believe, you like reading the Odyssey, do you believe in the gods that are described in the Odyssey? You didn't answer my question. You avoided it, and you said something to the effect of, well, first you'd have to establish that gods exist before you could say whether or not you believe in those gods. In other words, a rhetorical question instead of an answer. But I said to you, well, how can you read the Odyssey unless you believe in the gods? And you said, you read it because it's entertaining. You read it for entertainment. Well, that's a value judgment. When you say that, you're saying you judge literature on the basis of whether it entertains you, not necessarily whether it educates you, whether it fills you with knowledge, whether or not it reflects your view of the world. No. A standard. So I'm going to apply your standard to this. Is this entertaining? Well, the answer is yes, but why? Well, I have a lot of things to say about it, and I'll go one at a time. My grandmother once told me that the world, stop right there. What is this? This is first person. This is you telling your story yourself. It's my grandmother. So this form, telling the story yourself, I went to the store, I got up in the morning, I, me, not using your name, is called first person. Maybe you already know that, maybe you don't, I don't know, because we never talked about it. But what else is there besides first person? It's third person. That's when you don't say my grandmother, you say something like this. Her grandmother, or Brooke Miller's grandmother, once told her that the world used to be good. All right, so my grandmother once told me is first person. Brooke Miller's grandmother once told her is third person. But what's second person? There is a second person, and it's peculiar. It goes like this. Your grandmother once told you that the world used to be a good place to live in. It's a substitute you for I and her. So you is not found very much, but you can picture it. It's a person describing your behavior for you, but of course you're a fictional person. Now you can see this is going to take a while because there's a lot of things I want to talk about here. Before I read this next sentence, I want to say this. The mark of a good writer is the ability to create a sentence that is totally surprising and catches you off guard and makes you even stop reading to absorb it. And especially if that piece of information falls at the end of the sentence. Now these are not rules. I'm just describing what you have done that makes this good reading. That you could live where you wanted and sleep when you wanted and there were no corpses out in the street. Well, that is a very, very powerful sentence because you don't expect it, it shocks you, and it sets up an idea that this is going to be a dystopian work. There's utopia, where everything is perfect, as in government and in human affairs, and there's dystopia, where everything is screwed up. People are dead in the street. There's tyranny, there's pollution. This is going to be what you set out to do by just the first paragraph is you set up to describe characters, we don't know these characters, but we'll find out, in a utopia. Now you go on. They were just another item. Your parents died, killed by the Federation as if they didn't matter, as if they were just an item to cross off their to-do list. Well, that's a very good way to say that they were killed inadvertently for no reason. It's just a wonderful way to phrase it. Now we go on. They used to pretend it was a democracy. They don't pretend anymore. Now, up until that point, everything that you said is vaguely theoretical about your situation, about what life is like. There's corpses in the street, your parents are dead, your grandparents are dead, and all of a sudden, Brooke, Adriana's shout shocks me out of my daydream. Now, I have to stop here and talk about this. The introduction of dialogue is one of the most difficult things that writers face. Often people will set out to write a novel, and as soon as they get to the point where they have to have somebody speak, they give up because it's so hard to do. Why is it? I've noticed already that you understand how to introduce dialogue into a narrative, and you do it in a kind of polished sort of way. You don't say, Adriana came in the room, looked at me and said, Brooke. No, you just plunge right into the dialogue. Which leads me to another thing I want to say about this. You see the influence of things that you read, because you're kind of like this. If somebody gives you a multiple choice test, you answer the questions, but you're peculiar in this sense. After you've finished the multiple choice questions and answer them, you start creating your own multiple choice tests and filling out the questions and creating the questions. So you're a person who not only does a thing, but understands how it was done. So what I'm trying to say here is, when you read a book, you not only understand the content of the book, but you understand how it was created, and you gain an understanding of, for example, how to use dialogue, because you use dialogue in a kind of professional way. Now here comes the very interesting thing. I remember what today is. Oh, I want to go back a little bit. Brooke, Adriana's shout shocks me out of my daydream. Why is this important? Because you could have said, Adriana's shout. Wait a minute. I gotta remember what I thought about this. Anyway, I have to skip over that because I can't remember exactly what I wanted to say about that. I'll come back to me later. And I remember what today is. Libertas dies, D-I-E-S, Freedom Day. Now what we have here is Latin, Libertas dies, and English, Freedom Day, and you have drawn a connection between the meaning of the Latin and the meaning of the English. And unlike what people usually do when they say the Latin is the source of the English, and you can see the connection, you've shown the opposite. You've shown that one is the opposite of the other. That is sufficiently sophisticated that I had to stop reading, go to Google, look up Libertas, D-I-E-S, and find out that it means Liberty Day. It's the D-I-E-S is day, as in the day before, as in so many days. What does this establish? One, that it's interesting. Two, you describe you're beginning to describe yourself as a highly read person. Like, who is this person? Like, what age is this person? I mean, what kind of things does she read? These are unanswered questions that we're going to get to. So, that is very good. Now, I told you that, you can't, your father says, as my father always said, you can't let the economic and political crisis stop your education. Just because there is always a crisis, it doesn't mean you always need your education. You probably left a word out there, but nevertheless, when I read that, I thought, is this an imaginary father that she's talking about? A fictional father? Or is this the kind of thing that her father actually says to her? Because it could be. There's thoughts like that enter your mind when you start into a book. You start wondering, how much of this is the person's experience and how much of this is fiction is made up? But you go on to say, just thinking about him makes me want to curl up in a ball and cry till my eyes run out of tears. Why is this important? Because into this narrative, you've already described people dead. Your parents are dead. The grandparents are dead. There's corpses in the street. It's indifferent. It's like analytical. But all of a sudden, you introduce into this narrative tragedy and despair. So the tone and the tenor and the quality of the work changes entirely when you say that. And you realize at no point so far have you introduced what is you're very skillful at, and that is making people laugh by saying funny things. Inappropriate in this text, and it wouldn't work. And so you maybe not intentionally, but you have realized that the work that you're writing, at least at this point and as it's developing, there's no place so far to make us laugh. There's a place to make us want to cry, but not to laugh. Brooke, Adriana shouts again, and I look up as she holds up a sparkling black dress with boots and leggings to match. Don't you want to be dressed before Josh gets here? I nod and take the clothes. I put on the clothes. There's an important sentence here, I'm trying to find it. Oh, people often ask why Adriana and I are friends. We've known each other since as long as I can remember, and I still have no clue. Now, I talked to you about this idea several weeks ago. I said the writer deliberately declares that they don't know something. This is very important to establish the reality of the story. If the writer doesn't know, it must be true. It must be a real thing that's being described. Because to not know means you're dealing with the reality. But it's more to it than that. She doesn't know really anything about, for example, says, I don't know where Adriana gets this stuff for 12-year-olds, but whoever makes them must be an excellent sewer. Now that is not a throwaway line. By throwaway line, I mean a line that just fills up space. It says several different things, and it's what I call burdocks. It's burdocks because so many different situations and concepts can be caught on that to structure the story going on. This is dystopia. Everything's screwed up. There's corpses in the street. But Adriana has wealthy, expensive stuff, beautiful clothes. Why? The reader thinks, why? Is she part of the Federation and is in disguise? Is she a secret agent? Is she just lucky? Is she very smart and has resources? That is why I call it burdocks, because the answer could be 1,000 different things. From that is the structure of how you build a story. And then lastly, the stuff for 12-year-olds, you're telling the reader how old you are, because how old the characters in the story are. This is a very, very important clue, because up until now, Brooke could have been 25 or even 32. There's no way to know. When she's talking about her parents' death, it could have been two decades ago. Now, this got very confusing for me, because when I got to Josh Brown, Freedom Day, never my favorite day, I thought I was still reading first person Brooke. So I'm thinking, Freedom Day, never my favorite day, the anniversary of the death of democracy, so-and-so. So basically not football, makes matters worse, I have to walk past how does this make sense to me? And only later did I go back and realize that what you've done is you introduce your second character. The second character is now speaking in the first person. Well, I wasn't prepared for that and had to figure it out. And then only later did I examine it and discover that this is Josh Brown's diary, and that the earlier part was a Brooks diary, and that this is a diary. It's a trip, I imagine, that I don't think that, I have no idea what you're going to do next, but will Brooke also speak in the first person? Because she hasn't yet. And so what I see forming here is a story consisting of first person diaries. Diary is important because it means everything written is without knowledge of what's to come. There's no retrospective. There's no looking back on. There's no, God, that was a terrible year, because we don't know what the year is going to hold. So, is this entertaining? Well, yes. As a matter of fact, I'll put it like this. It's like the beginning of a season of a series. It's like season one, first episode. Season 1, episode 1, the beginning of the first season. And what I want is the season 2. Not season 2, I want season 1, episode 2. After I get to read season 1, the rest of episode 1. And I'll leave you with this comment, and it's from Socrates. Socrates said this. He said, people go to the racetrack and they watch the horses run. Their horses run faster and faster and faster, and the people leap up and they yell, run, run, run. And he says, why? The horses are running as fast as they can run. Why yell run at horses that are running? Well, he didn't answer the question, but I'll put the question to you. Write. And if you're writing, well, write some more, because I want to read it. So that's the end of your lesson. It has nothing to do with this or with this, and that will be for next week. And there's no assignment because you're traveling the whole week, and I didn't want to burden you with that. But I'll give you a physics question to answer. A physics question is, for me, it's part of the art. Why is it part of the art lesson? It's part of the art lesson because I'm asking it and I'm your art teacher. Why don't these people fall over? If I got in that position, I would fall over. What keeps them from falling over? Not the hand on the ice, because his hand's not on the ice. And he's not going to fall over. Answer me that question, and I'll see you on the Zoom.